It's real talk. Serve straight up. Welcome to PBM on the Rocks.
So I drove straight there. I got in Wednesday morning at like 5:05 a.m. And then it was like the drive home was rough.
You were in like the back of a U-Haul with a polka band from Sheboygan to get there. Yeah. That's all. That's the first thing I thought of when Monique told me that story. I was just like,
and I drive a lot. I like driving, but that was rough,
Yeah.
I'm not used to going through the night anymore. I could do it when I was in my 20s, but.
One of my biggest questions, Greg, can you tell us what it was like on the Armed Forces panel that you were on? And, how was it debating with, Eric from Billy Madison?
Yeah. What was the quote for that? We were all now dumber having heard that answer, or something like that.
I award you 0 points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
I mean, I'll tell you that's how I felt when he was trying to answer Senator Warren's question about, are you agreeable to an audit? Right? It was like, what was that answer?
That was like pulling teeth, wasn't it? He eventually agreed to it. Yeah, and I think with that, we might as well just jump right into it and welcome everybody here to a special episode of PBM on the Rocks. Joined with podcast folks, we've got a very special guest, Greg Reybold, with us, and we've got, of course, our executive director at PUT, Monique Whitney, and all the way over from the podcast, host Lauren Young. Hello, Lauren. How are you?
Hi, Andrew. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you. Then we've got everybody will recognize Chris Hobart down there from Texas.
Hello.
Hey, Chris. And then making her podcast debut today is going to be the lovely Kendra, also from Texas. Hello, Kendra. How are you?
Hey, I'm happy to be here, Andrew.
Oh, happy to have you.
We are so happy to have you, Kendra. I don't know why it has been so long and we haven't had you on any of our podcasts. Y'all, Kendra is a lot of fun.
Oh, no.
My arm is on the live cast from NCV. You can see me handing someone something. So there you go. I've been on.
Okay, we're going to have to update the credits for that episode. So, all right.
That's right. I am uncredited. But that actually, if you look at IMDb, uncredited roles are sometimes the best. So I'm fine with that.
That's fair.
I have a fun fact for you, Kendra, if it makes you feel better. Kevin Costner's first role was as the dead guy in The Big Chill.
See, my role as floating arm with glass of water could become a thing.
It could, because Kevin Costner was never pictured. It was just, I think, a body bag that was being zipped up. So his first role, they didn't even show his face. So
he was a prop.
He was a prop.
And yours is the the hand that's moving everything behind the scenes. The most important part, really.
There you go.
True.
Yeah, that's it.
So for everybody, anyone listening who didn't see the hearing, our bill, Pharmacists Fight Back Act 6610, was first on the docket, and there was great conversation. I was, except for, of course, you have to have the one person who has to defend the PBMs. In this case, it was Representative Burleson. But, great conversation. It was really going somewhere, and then no vote.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I was like, oh, shoot, Greg's going to have to sit there through all the other bills until they vote.
Well, we left the room, but it was, and partly probably, because I was so tired, right? But it was a little confusing, right? I think for a lot of folks watching, but they voted on the substitute, right?
Yeah.
But then, then they wanted to, essentially record the vote, which I think is a great thing because we got to see how much support there really was, right, for the bill, which was awesome. And I think all the hard work that pharmacists did all over the country, calling and asking for support, and now they can see, hey, yeah, my congressperson, who's on that committee was there, and they voted yes, right, all but two. So it was a strong showing. But yeah, definitely, it extended the day a little bit for sure. So
the numbers were worth the wait.
They were, and you know what? I'm glad because there's something, and like Lauren, you watched this, right, more than anybody I know in terms of like following the different states, and there's just something satisfying about seeing the votes on the board, right?
Oh, yeah.
seeing it culminate in all of these Congress people voting yes to advance, this legislation that's so important to pharmacy and patients. And it feels, I think it adds a level of like legitimate feeling when you see your congressperson voting yes and you see that vote recorded. So I'm thrilled that they did it.
Oh, absolutely. You watch that board and you get to see, all of the yes votes and then those couple little no votes. But then you think about all the hundreds of pharmacy owners and technicians and patients that were calling all of those legislators' districts in order to make sure they were going to vote yes. And so, it's wonderful to see that there was so much support. This is a wonderful first step. This is more than we could have hoped for at this point, right before the August recess.
It's a pretty good way to go into recess, right? Pretty good way. And it opens up, different avenues and just a lot of exciting work to do, right? Certainly not the finish line, but a lot of exciting work now, and it opens up a lot of different avenues. So I think it's a really cool time, really exciting time. And I also think it's a fair time to reflect about where we started, when the first version was introduced in 2024, right? And all the work to getting that Putt did in particular, right? Working so hard to get those 50 co-sponsors and sort of, get this legislation validated. Yes, there's an appetite for this. Yes, there are people in DC that are willing to fight for independent pharmacies, that are willing to fight for their patients. And, to have a champion like a Chairman Comer, who's willing to co-lead the bill with Auchincloss and then, get this thing advanced through his committee and marked up when not a lot of bills are getting marked up. Yeah. Very cool. Right. And, lots of work to do as I get older, though. I do think it's worth marking the moments. And I think this is a moment worth marking. So
I also think highlighting the amount of different groups, like advocacy groups, pharmacy groups that came together, professional associations, state associations that came together to support the bill and sign on to the letter of support was outstanding as well. Just kudos to all of you out there and everyone out there that reached out to their state organization, reached out to organizations they knew, reached out to everybody to get signed on to that letter of support. And I think what would we have, like 63 different
in short time
organizations. It's like a week.
In an unbelievably short time. And like, look, I'm going to say that, right? Monique, I'm going to say this is your specialty, right? Like short notice, whatever. We had a press conference in DC and in like a week, I think there was over 50 pharmacies that came from like 20 states. And then we have this coalition letter and all, was it 62, right? I think 62 different organizations. Crazy that like how quickly that came together.
Yeah, we had a short period of time to make it happen. And it really did require a team, just getting the word out about the coalition letter. We didn't have to sell organizations on signing the letter. We just had to let them know that it was there. And then, in some cases, some organizations, have a process. So we were keeping our fingers crossed that they'd get back to us. And other ones were like, sign us up. Absolutely. We're going to be part of that. But, I think that's what makes groups like ours unique, is that we really can mobilize quickly. We've got an incredible membership that are really in this fight and, they have skin in this game. And so they're ready to pick up the phone. And Chris is one of the people I know who's like, he is the most unafraid to make phone calls. Remember Chris, when we were first trying to get 9096, the first version of this bill, we were trying to get co-sponsors and you were like all over that. How many times did you call Jody Arrington's office?
Oh, too many, twice a day. And you just get the same people. And I was calling people in Pennsylvania, Colorado, any number you gave me, I was calling it and doing the same line and delivering it. I was so psyched when I read 9096. I was like, this is the best thing I've ever read in my life. I was like, this is the Bible for pharmacy. It fixes our problems. We can finally stop losing prescriptions to mail order. People can fill locally. Like everybody's going to be happy. Patients win, pharmacists win, everybody wins. Payers actually would win because they ended up paying less, so everybody would win. And I just went crazy with that bill the first year. I think that's when I got put on the board after that campaign, because it was so much fun doing all that work. And that's when I was just like, man, if we just get this one bill, so many problems will fix across the board, all these different things. And man, I've just been so big on Pharmacists Fight Back since then, since I first read it. And I still think it's the best bill, in pharmacy. There's a lot of other good ones now at the state level and other stuff. But and I think it's a close second would be that PBMs can't own pharmacies, but I still like PFB. It's still my favorite. But those are two like insanely good bills that we're seeing go through. But yeah, that was my journey to get on the PUT board. Was
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I found PUT and I was like, you guys are trying to get this done. I was like, I want to get that done. So I just collaborated, and Monique and Andrew and everyone reached out to me, and kind of clicked instantly with everybody, and was like, yeah, we should make this happen, and whatever you guys need to do, like I'm here, I'll volunteer. And yeah, that's how I ended up on the board, was doing all that work for 9096 the first time.
Yeah. Well, you guys are, between all of you have so many and when we started with the draft letter, it was, we had APCI on it, and then I added my name, and then my two kids, and then Melissa, and then Monique was like, bless your heart, we'll handle this, So,
let's get some dogs and cats on here.
Yeah, I was like,
well, I mean, I think that anyone who saw, your son's names on there, right, would have been like, oh, well, we gotta sign on. I mean, one of them is like a YouTube sensation, and so we gotta join, right? Because like this means the next generation.
There's always one, my oldest son read it and he's like, well, I'd like to make a few changes before I sign. I'm like, oh, can you just sign your name on the left? No, we wanted to revise it,
Oh, you're not asking for enough. Ask for more.
There you go.
He's like, can we make the bill strong? I'm like, come on, just put your name.
Actually, it's funny because when we were doing that letter, there were a small minority that were, well, I guess by definition, a minority small, but there were a small number of people that were like, well, what if we, and they wanted it. One person was like, well, can we tweak the bill this way? And we're like, no, we cannot.
But there's always, right? Look, I've been that guy, like where people are like, hey, can we sign up? If nothing else, it shows that they're, reading it carefully and right. So, but there's times in the political process, where, there's ebbs and flows, right? And so.
It was really great watching that hearing and then seeing the board afterward. Was there were people who voted yes that I didn't have conversations with, not for lack of trying. It's kind of a running joke between Greg and I that every time I fly back from DC, I almost always end up sitting next to one of the congressmen in the delegation from Arizona.
Monique has the touch. It's unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. Anything like it.
Really dumb luck that happens, right? And then so now as we got a 4.5 hour flight, and I'm there trying to like not be pushy, but very casually introduce this idea that there's this Pharmacists Fight Back Act, and they're always great, but they're always non-committal. And then there was like the ranking member, Robert Garcia. And he's in California. I'm in Arizona. You guys none of us on this panel today are in California. So we were like out there trying to find our California members and reaching out to Robert Garcia. But it was such an unknown. And then to see Arizona delegates signed on, Robert Garcia, they voted yes. All of these ones where we never could get, it was uncertain, right? It was just uncertain. And then they all ended up signing on in favor. And I just think that just shows that, it's okay to trust your lawmakers, that they're going to get this information. They may not commit to you in the moment, but don't let that discourage you. Also, don't let it make you give up either.
Yeah.
Oh, it's hugely motivating.
Else about this earlier. I had heard a pharmacist say this, I think it was last week, a frustrated pharmacist saying, hey, nobody, right? Like nobody cares about this issue. And, there's tons of work to do all over the place. But I think, if there's any kind of takeaway over the last few weeks, it is there are a lot of Congress people that care about community pharmacists, care about independent pharmacists, care about their patients, right? There are hundreds to thousands of organizations that would kill to have, the chairman of oversight, Chairman Comer, co-lead a bill and sort of take it upon himself to ensure that this bill is one of thousands that are never going to make, this bill is one that is going to be marked up and clear his committee. Like that's a big deal. And even, the TRICARE hearing 2 weeks ago, right? Senator Warren is the ranking member on that subcommittee. And as ranking member, she gets to have really largely, she gets to pick one issue to hold a hearing on. She can hold one hearing on anything dealing with, right, armed services personnel. And she picked the TRICARE pharmacy program, right? Because she cares, about the issue, and she cares about community pharmacists, and she cares about patients, and TRICARE families having access to the pharmacy of their choice. And so, right, I mean, tons of work to do, but I think it shows that there are people who very much care and are willing to fight for independent pharmacists, fight for their patients, and even sometimes the one who maybe aren't jumping out there and co-sponsoring a bill, right? Ranking member Garcia said unequivocally, right, that he supported the bill in that hearing. And that was, so it was a pretty cool moment. And I think as you kind of go into a weekend after a crazy few weeks and you look at what are the takeaways, I do hope that that's a takeaway for pharmacists across the country, which is there are people who get it, and are, they could pick any issue they wanted, and this is the issue that they're fighting for. I think that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I totally agree. And I think that what we talked about, as in many of the chat groups and things like that we were all a part of for the last couple weeks, was it was impressive to see people who had not spoken up before in a committee hearing speak in favor of this. And I really think that shows that we are on the right track. No one on this podcast ever doubted that PFB was the horse we wanted to get behind. No one doubted that TRICARE was a massive need for an overhaul. And so I think that, it's one thing whenever our, small group understands it, but now our legislators are getting it. Their staffers are understanding it and telling other people, yes, this is a bill that, Chairman Comer or Auchincloss is on. This is something you should get behind. There was only 5 legislators that supported it at that very first PFB, press conference. And since then, I think it's an easier ask, I think now, because legislators don't need help spelling PBM. They don't need to know why it's not okay for our military families to have to pay more or have worse access to their medications. And I think that, Greg, you've done a lot of education on that. And so that's been something that our whole working group and our teams really appreciate. And so that's what we're really, it's easier for us to do our job in advocating for it whenever there's a good product that we can have our, name behind and have the legislators get on to support. And so it's just crazy that this is a topic that no matter whether it's Republican or Democrat, there's big names that are coming out in support of these issues.
Big names, needle movers. And then I think now, y'all know, right? I'm locked out of social media. I switch phones, but I've not seen it, but I've heard there's, I think it was a Representative McCormick, literally did a video post on his support of the bill.
Yes, he did.
Right.
Yep, right.
So, physician, right? Big deal, right? These folks who are getting excited about this bill, I think the momentum is building. I think the momentum is growing. And so there's always there's different ways you can look at it, right? But as I'm, ending this few week period and, it's time to accelerate, right? Keep going and build on it, because I feel like there's momentum and, that's not the time to let up, right? It's, just keep going.
Oh,
I was so impressed with how many state associations signed on to the letter so quickly. I know Texas did. I was really, really happy. They did not hesitate. They were like, this aligns. Yeah. I mean, so many other states too, just everybody coming together.
So cool, right? Alabama, Pharmacy Association jumped on, California, New York, Virginia. There's so many, right? I mean, obviously can't name all of them, but, and it's also, right, if you look at the members of the committee, some key state associations that, where those representatives who were on oversight are on signed on to that. And so strong. And I think everybody was so impressed with how many folks signed on in such a short amount of time. And then also,
We had
PUT
unions
and,
sign on. We had
NCPA and
local business associations sign on. I mean,
unions.
It was really an incredible message that was coming forward, that even the employers and those representing businesses were like, look, this is more than time. We need to do this. And I was incredibly encouraged by that because, you guys may remember, we had some headwinds initially when we were first introducing this idea. The prevailing thought was, well, don't mess up the progress that's already going. We've been on a slow and steady movement. This will be very radical, and we heard that from a lot of different places, but us being us and Greg being the fighter that he is, and some of the other organizations that also were early adopters of the idea, we wanted to have this conversation. We wanted to plant this flag, and I think it's nothing short of miraculous that so we first talked about this at the summit in 2024. That was in the fall, right? Like September. And then, here it is. It's almost, not quite, 24 months later. And we have passed this meaningful milestone that the language, it's gone through markup. It's been, not quite unanimously, but almost unanimously voted on in favor of. And I just think that's remarkable. And I think it's worth saying that you want to have courage when you're doing this work, that predictable, playing political games, being slow and steady, like there are places for that, but it probably shouldn't be your guiding strategy. You don't want to be a jerk about these things, but for me, it's validating because I know from the beginning, every PUT board member, I've been here 10 years, most of you have been here as long as I have. And, we never entertained anything small from the beginning. We were there to shatter perceptions and change the status quo. So even like the fact that there is Chris alluded to it, the PBM bill, right? The breakup, the PBMs, right? They can't own pharmacies. We were talking about that. That was us. Many, many years ago, we were like, why don't we just break them up? Why don't we just break them up? Now there's a breakup Big Medicine Coalition. And I'm not saying we caused that, but I think there's something about putting it out there, getting it in the conversation. You might as well talk about it.
Right? Y'all threw that out there, right?
Yeah. We had a meeting. I think it was a few of us in like a working group, and it was just like, we should focus on something. What should we focus on? I think everyone agreed, like, TRICARE is just the low hanging of the big three. That is the one that's most egregious, affects the like more special population of military people. So it's kind of like if you just get them behind it to help them, it helps us, and it's a win for everybody. I think TRICARE was the one we were just like, if we just go after that one, I think we could actually get something to move. And now the needle has moved. I just want to celebrate the fact that in 2024, I knew it was called the Pharmacists Fight Back Act. And I was like, every pharmacy organization should get on this one immediately. It's pharmacists fighting back. Who would fight against pharmacists? And it was a lot harder in 2024 to get those names on there. And then in 2026, like we said earlier, in just like the matter of a week, we got 62, people on there immediately. Pharmacy organizations, all of them just signing right on. And that was not the case just 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So
and anything new, right, can be like, I certainly take satisfaction. I think now, my hope, and I think that's the coalition letter, I think sort of indicates this, right? But this can be a very unifying concept, right?
Yes.
This can be something I took particularly satisfaction in. And Monique, you remember this because we talked about it, but in December for the reintroduction, and you look in the room and just like the best of the best, who like win in states showed up, right? The folks who fight big fights every year over year and win showed up at the federal level. Like all these just like folks who were champions in their respective states all convened for the reintroduction of this, right? Like, the John Vincents, the Ben Mudds, and the Randall Johnsons, right? You can't name all of them, but folks who fight big fights and win. And they showed up for that. And like, boy,
our rock stars. Our rock stars who aren't everybody else's rock stars. Like ours are different than theirs.
Hello, my name is Andrew Russell. I am the co-owner of Elko New Market Family Pharmacy, and you might recognize me from the PBM on the Rocks podcast. I am also a proud DataScan user of 6 years. We decided to use DataScan in our pharmacy when we first opened. We were looking for a software vendor that met a good price point, one that was easy to work with, one that wasn't too complicated starting out. And DataScan checked all those boxes for us right away. When we got in touch with them, they were on it. They wanted to make sure we were set up for success before we opened our door. DataScan is different from all the other software vendors that I've worked with. When you call DataScan, you get to talk to somebody right away, and they really genuinely help you fix your problems. Other software vendors that I have used, if you call, you wait on hold forever, you have to leave a message, they have to call you back, you go through a phone tree of options. DataScan is just hands down the most responsive software vendor that I've ever used. And I also can't say enough about how customizable the workflow is. It's very intuitive. The other thing that I like about DataScan, they support independent pharmacy and they support advocacy for independent pharmacy. They really do have the best interests of independent pharmacy in mind. And that is something that you cannot put a price on. But they have, and it's very low, which is nice. I couldn't think of a better software partner for an independent pharmacy than DataScan. I really can't.
DataScan Pharmacy Software. Independently owned software for independent pharmacies. Visit datascanpharmacy.com or call us at 877-222-7979 today.
But yeah, it was, and you always say, winning begets winning.
Mhm.
And I think that there was something to be said about that, and we have Ben Mudd to thank for so much work he did in helping to get the state associations
Kentucky has been unbelievable in so many ways. Yeah.
Tennessee.
They have.
Yeah,
They really
absolutely. And they're
Well,
like in
it's
pharmacy
so refreshing.
world.
Mhm.
Because, we've all been in legislators' offices, on the phone with legislators' offices, and you come out of those calls and those conversations thinking, did they get anything out of this? I don't know. But then we get to a vote like this and they heard you. How motivating is that?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And on that point, Kendra, I think also legislators that got it and understand how important this is for their voters in their district, their constituents, and our patients, they want to make sure that we know that they listen to us. So they're posting on social media. They're making sure that their staffers are answering correctly when Chris is calling twice a day,
Yes.
no matter what it is. And I think that's why when, Nikki was able to help get Congressman McCormick to post that, he quickly posted that after the hearing and the vote to make sure that everyone knew that he was supportive of this.
So
We've also
cool.
seen Diana
Amazing.
Harshbarger post that, reminding everyone that she is one of the supporters of Pharmacists Fight Back. My own Congresswoman Nikki Budzinski, who is a supporter of PFB, made sure she mentioned it in her Axios interview. Our Illinois coalition was texting Congressman Raja, and he made sure to respond to every one of us and say, I voted the way that you guys wanted me to, like, thumbs up, let's go PFB. Like, that's the kind of relationships that through this working group that we have, because I know that other people are working as hard as they should be. That's kind of more motivating to make sure that we're getting someone from our home state, our area, something.
Absolutely. But, there's different, Monique was talking about how there were some folks we weren't sure how they were going to vote and how satisfying that was to see. And then there's other states like Illinois where literally within like 7 minutes of introduction, and Lauren was like, okay, done. They're locked in, right? Like you had, it was.
That's right.
Yeah.
I used the mafia from Steve Moore's home state of New York and just said, let's get this done. Let's get this done. One vote, one vote at a time. But again, we have 40 people that voted yes on this bill this week. We have, a few hundred more to go to get them on. But I think that, pressure bust pipes, they don't want to be the legislator that says no to this bill unless you live in ESI's backyard.
Sure.
It seems like,
Right.
that everyone else understands that this is an important issue, and they don't want to be the one that has to go back into their district and tell their constituents that, yeah, I voted to make sure your drug prices stay high.
Yeah.
I think that's the tactic that we've kind of gone with, and they don't want to be the one left out. Legislators are making sure that they are staying on top of their game, and this is an issue that is not going away. So I think that we've kind of made it known that we are going to come back, whether DC, wherever it is, and make the presence known. We'll have Monique find you on your plane, sit next to you, and educate you.
It has happened on flights then other to Phoenix as well. I once, I didn't get to sit by him, but I was once standing in line catching a flight to Atlanta, and the guy I was talking to was like, "Oh, I know Raphael Warnock. He's on this plane. I'll introduce you." And sure enough, as we were walking by, he was like, "Brother, you got to talk to this woman, right?" And I genuinely felt bad because I was like, "Here's this man. He's just finished his week, and he's sitting there, and the look on his face was like, okay."
Well, you always get them on Friday afternoons, don't you? Right? Like
Thursday afternoons, Friday. I mean, the secret really is if you can get a Thursday afternoon flight, you can pretty much catch them. Although I've had luck catching flights to DC and sat next to people too. But it's there's so much really to celebrate. Like, I'm just thinking about this as we're talking about it. I think that I would really love people to know that this was a lot of effort over a period of time, which is really not as sexy as a Cinderella story. Like, oh yeah, we were this little team and we, beat out everybody in March Madness and we won the tournament, right? It really was a lot of work, but it was good work. It was satisfying work. And there were some moments where it was like, is this going to happen? Is this not going to happen? And same thing with TRICARE. We weren't the very first organization to talk about TRICARE. People have been talking about TRICARE for a long time. We happened to find data that gave us the opportunity to create an extremely easy to understand, extremely visual campaign about drug prices, that you didn't have to be on TRICARE to get your drugs less expensive, which then begged the question, why would anybody use TRICARE based on what we found? And I think that sparked another way of thinking about this that ultimately, helped get us to that place where we could have that hearing. And what I also thought was remarkable is that, and I don't know how this happened, but there was a senator from Missouri who got waved on very quickly. Tommy Tuberville introduced him by saying he's not even going to get a warm-up pitch. They just put him in to speak, and I think it must be awful to have to be the person to come in and defend the PBMs, because both times Burleson and Smith were just not, I didn't get them as entirely convincing. I mostly got them as like, hey guys, let's not beat them up too hard. Let's remember they're, I don't know, human beings. I was a little bit weird. And then both times what happened was they left really quickly. Like they were in and they were out.
Yeah.
They didn't hang around.
I think they drew the short straw.
Don't know how many people caught this, with the bill substitute for 6610, but how about PBM fines going from 10,000 a violation to 10 million a violation? How's that? That's a thing of beauty right there, right?
I did not catch that. Is that real? Did that happen?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
On 6610?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I missed that.
I remember it being $1 million the first time. I didn't know it went up. That's amazing.
There is a super huge national debt that we're trying to offset with tariffs. Maybe we could offset it with those fines. I mean, God knows they happen enough. Maybe someone should let the current administration know about this, and maybe they could ease off those tariffs. Maybe this would be like a good workaround, and then we could, offset. It'd be like a win-win, right? Because the healthcare companies are making the most money literally on the planet of anybody, except possibly SpaceX. I'm not.
Well, maybe there it is. Right? Maybe the next thing is a PBM tariff. You just maybe you came up with the next thing, Monique.
A PBM tariff.
PBM,
as long as it doesn't get passed on to
we
make
pay
up
for the prescription tax, right?
The prescription tax.
My
that's
favorite
funny.
talking point.
Oh,
the pill tax.
Yeah, the pill.
Gosh.
Yeah, what a crock.
Craig,
Oh,
what
man.
is since you're here and you're kind of the expert, tell us about 6610. Now that it's passed the markup, what does this in practical terms now mean? Because we're celebrating, but we're celebrating because it took a long time to get here, and yet it still moved faster than I think any federal bill I'm aware of in recent history. So, what, in practical terms, what does this mean now for 6610?
Yeah, I think it's a significant milestone, right? And not just symbolic. Once a bill gets marked up, I think it positions itself so that it's at least fair conversation. Very few bills will make it to the floor for a vote and, then cross over to the next chamber and go through that process. You just don't see that, right? Usually what happens is, there are sort of must pass bills, budget, omnibus type legislation. And I think it's fair to start having those conversations, right? Which is, hey, listen, this is something that has tremendous support, and to start having those conversations and working that. Now, that being said, there's, the bill hasn't been introduced in the Senate. It hasn't been, hasn't marinated in the Senate. There is no CBO score. And I think we even heard in the hearing, I think it was from Representative Walkinshaw, right, from Virginia, mentioning that it has to be scored, or, that there isn't a score yet. And, historically, the CBO is I think there's challenges there, right? Like how will it be scored, and do they know how to look at it? And drug pricing is something where you can't just take a presumption and sort of boom, come up with something and snap your fingers, and we've seen that from the CBO at times. And listen, I want to be sympathetic because it's very hard to score these things. They have a very, very difficult job. But one of the things that I was really happy with was Chairman Comer sort of put some things into the record that I think speak very much against sort of the PBM talking points, which is, oh my God, if you share rebates with patients, the sky is going to fall and premiums are going to go through the roof, because that's what the PBM lobby says. That's what the insurer lobby says, right? But when the West Virginia Commissioner of Insurance said, hey, insurance actuaries, file something and tell us what happened to premiums when we pass this law that says patients get the benefit of the rebate, and what we see is suppression of premiums. Or in Georgia, when PBMs say, oh my God, if you go to NADAC Plus, drug prices are going to go through the roof and premiums are going to soar. And then they do the math, they actually do the math and they rescore it. And lo and behold, there's potential savings or there's cost neutrality, right? And so Chairman Comer did something that I think was incredibly smart. And he included some of these things into the record at the markup. And so you now have these sources so that if it does get scored, if the CBO does look at it, there are places for them to start. And I think they can see that, that, hey, there are states that have done some of these things, and that it runs very much counter to a lot of the presumptions. You got to remember, on the Hill for years and years and years, PBMs and insurers have been saying, oh my God, mail order saves money. And, and obviously TRICARE, we talked a lot about that there, right? But mail order is cheaper. Mail order saves money. Specialty pharmacies that PBM owns, right? But every time you look under the rocks, it tells a very different story than those presumptions. And so, this bill is in a great position, because it's been marked up and because it has such strong champions. But that said, right, there's work to do. But I do think that there's opportunities, but there's, certainly work to do in the House still, and lots of work to do in the Senate as well.
Say, Greg, let's say the CBO actually scores this one right. What would the best possible CBO score if they actually do the math this time? Like, is it going to be the best CBO score in history of any bill? Or
if they did the math right?
Yeah, I mean, they actually do the math this time.
Here's my thing, and I'm certainly no expert, in this regard, but my thing is just actually do the math, right? Do a claims repricing. Georgia did it in the state health plan, right? Federal Employee Health Plan is a government-sponsored health plan, right? Georgia State Health Plan, smaller, but very similar, right? Do the math. Do a repricing. And what you find is, because the PBMs say, oh my God, you've got this dispensing fee, and the dispensing fee adds, however many million if you take the number of claims times the dispensing fee. But what they don't tell you is, the drugs that they're filling at their affiliated pharmacies are marked up so much that, if you cap that, right, you can still have savings, right? And that's something that they never talk about, right? But when they do the repricing, if you cut out the 47,000% markups on teriflunomide, or the 6,000% markups on imatinib, pardon me, y'all, if I'm mispronouncing these things, right? If you cut those out and you block that, because what a lot of people don't talk about, especially on their side, is, if this were a money grab, right, there wouldn't be a cap, there wouldn't be a ceiling, and so this aligns drug reimbursement with market-based pricing, and it also handcuffs the ability of PBMs, who are government contractors, to manipulate those prices and fix those prices in an anti-competitive way. And so in a perfect world, don't take a presumption that I give you. Don't take pharmacy's presumptions, but don't take the PBM or insurer presumptions either. Do the math, and the math will tell the story.
Yeah.
What about 6609, the Medicare and Medicaid version of Pharmacists Fight Back? Do you think there's any chance that it could get any movement at all? I mean, we're in the last 6 months of this Congress, but I don't know. What do you think?
I hope so. I would say, the vibe I get, and in defense to them, right? Like I don't know where everybody's at. There haven't been a lot of conversations, but obviously, there was PBM reform that passed in the 2026 Consolidated Appropriations Act, and a lot of those provisions were worked on by Energy and Commerce. I haven't felt a lot of excitement, frankly, for 6609 coming out of Energy and Commerce. So I would say there's a lot of work to do in that regard. But now that 6610 has passed out of oversight, I do think it's fair to have those conversations. Absolutely.
Do you think it's because they hate old people and poor people?
You heard it here first.
They are old people.
I know the most what do they call it? The most privileged nursing home in the world, or something like that. Yeah, most privileged nursing home in the country. I keep hearing this, and I'm like, oh, that's so spot on, and also mean, but still
Also kind of mean, yeah.
So yeah, and I think that's a fair assessment about 6609. I mean, we did kind of know, because there was language that went into the Consolidated Appropriations Act earlier in the year, and there's still, gnarly questions that have to be worked out around what constitutes reasonable and relevant terms. And so, of course, no one's going to want to be like, yeah, let's take on this next thing. But I can't help but think that, this model is such a strong model. The one for the Federal Employee Health Benefits Plan, 6610, is such a strong model that even private plans should be looking at it as an opportunity to rein in drug spending in their, employee benefits plans.
It should be mandatory
Absolutely.
in the RFPs to ban steering and everything. I think that's one thing that someone mentioned. So.
Absolutely. Ban steering, ban spread pricing, and share rebates. It should be in all of it.
Yeah, it should be their fiduciary duty to put that in every RFP. And if they're not,
They should have to have a fiduciary duty.
Yeah, that too.
I mean, if you're going to take that much money from the government, from taxpayers, yeah, you should have a fiduciary duty to the taxpayer. And I'm sorry, but it's not a radical thing to ask.
Yeah, and I think that gets lost on people, right? But these are, these pharmacy benefit managers are government contractors and government subcontractors, and they're literally leveraging their position as government contractors and subcontractors to essentially rig the market, right, in their favor, and take away beneficiary choice, and use their position to act anti-competitively towards independent pharmacies, some non-affiliated grocery pharmacies and chain, right? I mean, it's literally, they're leveraging their position as government contractors to rig the market in their favor. And they're like, it has to stop. It can't stand. It's not right. It's not, there's one winner when that happens, and that's them.
Yeah, I think my favorite quote from the Armed Services Committee hearing was, what is the purpose of this contract, from Senator King from out of Maine? And like, yeah, what is the purpose of this contract?
Mm-hmm.
It's
crazy that we have to remind ourselves and our government that we are the customer and we are the client. That we're working on that right now in another state, really actively trying to get to the governor and remind him that his state is the client, and that the state should not be subordinate to the PBM. That is the weirdest thing when you think about it. But, that said, also people tend to abdicate their healthcare choices, right? How many people have ever been like, well, the doctor just said to do it, so I did it. And then someone else in their life is like, are you crazy? Why didn't you get a second opinion? We got to remember, like, nothing should be bigger than the government, and the government is the government of the people in this country. So it really shouldn't be that all of us are subordinate to Cigna, Express Scripts.
Yeah.
Aetna,
And,
CVS.
also, Monique, people do tend to abdicate healthcare, but people also tend to trust, right? And if you're a TRICARE family and you're a TRICARE beneficiary, and the Defense Health Agency and their contracted PBM say, hey, mail order is cheaper. And, you're busy with your life and you trust that. And you make that decision. Or in many cases within TRICARE, mail order is mandatory. So there's not even a choice, right? But when you dig into the data, what we were able to see is it may look like retail is more expensive, when you look at sort of the codified copay tiers that completely favor mail order, which is outrageous that exists. But yet in practice, what happens? Retail, independent pharmacies are being reimbursed $1, $2, $3, and the mail order is being reimbursed at the statutory copay ceiling over and over and over again. So that mail order, despite DHA and despite the PBM saying, hey, mail order is the cheaper option here. And, I think it's fair for TRICARE families to trust that, right? But when you look under the hood, what happens? The myth comes, crashing to the ground, and turns out TRICARE families are paying, in many cases, 1,000% more in copay, or 500, 600, 700% more in cost sharing to use this mail order that's supposed to be the cheaper alternative. And then you do a little research because, Georgia and West Virginia, PBMs have to report their markups above NADAC and below NADAC within certain ranges. Only 2 states to do that. And what we see is, Express Scripts is reimbursing in the commercial market in Georgia far, far less than what they're charging TRICARE beneficiaries for generics at that mail order pharmacy, right? And we saw replete examples of that over and over and over again, from my perspective, unconscionable.
Greg, you laid that out so eloquently in that hearing. Like, that was amazing. I know our entire pharmacy was just like, donk! Like, it was awesome. Like, I couldn't have said it better. Was there anything that you came out of that hearing that you learned that you didn't know going in?
I'll say
based
this
on the answers.
Yeah, I mean, look, they're masters at evasion, right? I mean, like, I don't know that there was that Express Scripts had like an on point answer to any of the tough questions. But what I would say is the process, I learned a lot, like going up to the hearing, PBMs, so many times it's the same game, right? Like, it's, you can hold a PBM hearing in any state, if they're engaging in a practice once, they're engaging in a practice 10,000 times, and they're doing it all over the country. I think that the PBMs and, Express Scripts and DHA, I think they went in very confident, frankly, right? And I think that there are programmatic differences in TRICARE, which make TRICARE a little bit more complicated. And so in the process, I certainly learned a lot, because TRICARE, there are programmatic differences, but yet, when you look in the right places, what you find out is, and what I think I learned the most is, absolutely, right, they're engaging in that sort of retail, that retail network. They're administering, and I think it was their words in one of the court filings or one of the motions, one of the pleadings, but they're implementing that network simultaneously and on an indivisible basis with their other networks, their other commercial networks, federal employee health plan network. And right, like, it's not hyperbole. That is damning, right? That is damning, because the OIG audits are out there in the federal employee health benefits plan, and we know what those practices are. So I certainly think going into the hearing, I learned a lot. I would say in the hearing, there certainly wasn't anything that they said that surprised me.
And I thought you did a very good job of bringing those outside studies in too, and making sure that they were looking at the OIG audits and everything else that's come out, rather than just focusing on the one TRICARE issue. So that kudos to you on that as well.
Well, and I think, look, to me, what's fascinating is they use TRICARE sort of as a sword and as a shield in state litigations, right? Or in, litigations involving state actions, not necessarily like in state court. And so, in some of these pleadings and in some of these motions, they're worth a read, right? Because it's fascinating the things that are revealed in those and the positions that they take. And, it may be something that, in that litigation they think is helping them, but some of the statements that they're making, for purposes of TRICARE, I personally think are pretty damning.
Yeah. Talking out of both sides of their mouths for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. So, well, thanks everybody for joining us on our relaunch of PBM on the Rocks. It was nice to see all of you. Greg, thank you for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you as always. And
always fun.
Till next time, friends.